Samjaya said, having thus spoken to Arjuna, Vasudeva Krsna revealed him to again his own form. The Exalted One, having assumed again the form of grace, comforted the terrified Arjuna. Samjaya describes what happened to Dhritarashtra. Vasudeva Shri Krishna told Arjuna that, Arjuna, when you have love for me, then your fear goes away. Bewilderment no longer remains with you, and you will no longer have a feeling of trembling. That is why you should see this form of mine again. Having said this, Vasudeva Shri Krishna once again showed his form to Arjuna. Then once again the Supreme Soul assumed the Saumya Murti, the beautiful form, and comforted the terrified Arjuna. We should understand this verse a little. Samjaya describes two levels. The first is that the Supreme Soul revealed to Arjuna the Svaktam Rupam, the Supreme Soul's own form. That was the Chaturbhuj Swarup, the four-armed form. And then the Supreme Soul showed Arjuna the Saumya Murti, the beautiful form. The word Bhuya is used here. The word Bhuya comes twice in this verse. The first was that the Supreme Soul went from the Vishwarup, the universal form, into the Chaturbhuj Swarup, the four-armed form. Then the word Bhuya is used again to show that the Supreme Soul once again assumed the Saumya Murti, the beautiful form. If I were to say the reason for this in very simple language, then the root form that Sri Krishna has taken as Arjuna's friend and the son of the brother of Arjuna's mother is the form of a human being. This is Sri Krishna with two arms. If you see the majority of photos of the chariot, then you'll see the Supreme Soul is having two arms, and not the Chaturbhuj Swarup, the four-arm form. How then did the Supreme Soul go to the Vishwarup, the universal form? There are stages. When Sri Krishna had the Dvibhuj Swarup, the two-arm form, then he went into the Chaturbhuj Swarup, the four-arm form. And then he went from the Chaturbhuj Swarup, the four-arm form, to the Vishwarup, the universal form. And you have to go back in the same route that you came from. Therefore, Sri Krishna went back from the Vishwarup, the universal form, to the Svaktam Rupam, the Supreme Soul's own form. That was the Chaturbhuj Swarup, the four-arm form. And then he went from the Chaturbhuj Swarup, the four-arm form, to the Saumya Murti, this beautiful form. That was the Dvibhuj Swarup, the two-arm form once again. I will say it once again, that is within the limits of language, and that is why I'm saying that Sri Krishna went from one form to another and became one form after another. This is not the same as the special effects we see that the Supreme Soul goes from one form to another on television when the number of arms changes. It is not the same as when the form of the Supreme Soul goes from the four-armed form to the two-armed form. If you want to see it in reality, then you can say that the change has not happened to the Supreme Soul. The change has happened in Arjuna's perspective. When Arjuna manifested his wish to have a vision of the Vishwarup, the universal form, and he told the Lord that he wished to see that form, then God said, Pashya me partha rupani shatashota sahasraha. Behold, O Partha, my forms, 100-fold, 1,000-fold. Arjuna was listening to this, but he was not able to see this. But when the Supreme Soul gave him the divine vision, then what was the very first vision that Arjuna had? It was as if the Supreme Soul was going from the Dvibhuj Swarup, the two-arm form, into the Chaturbhuj Swarup, the four-arm form, because this is what Arjuna had read in the Puranas. Arjuna had read the scriptures that Sheshasai Vishnu, Lord Vishnu who rests on the divine serpent, had the Chaturbhuj Swarup, the four-arm form, and Lakshmi, the goddess Lakshmi, serves him. Arjuna had read all of this. That is why Arjuna first saw the transformation from the Dvibhuj Swarup, the two-arm form, into the Chaturbhuj Swarup, the four-arm form. Therefore, Arjuna first saw the Chaturbhuj Swarup, the four-arm form. And then when the descriptions went on, the more that Arjuna had a vision of them, and the closer that Arjuna went to the Vishwarup, the universal form, then you read the descriptions of what Arjuna had a vision of went from the Saumya Swarup, the beautiful form, to the Rodra Swarup, the terrible form. Now, when the vision changed, then what does this mean? If I were to say the meaning in very simple language, then the divine vision that Arjuna had now went away. Now Arjuna once again had the vision of the material world. Once again Arjuna began to see the Supreme Soul as the Dvibhuj Swarup, the two-armed form. The experience happened and it was recorded in Arjuna's existence. Now Arjuna will never speak out in a loud tone in front of the Supreme Soul. Now Arjuna will never call Sri Krishna or Yadav or comrade. This will not happen anymore. The Supreme Soul's Dvibhuj Swarup, the two-armed form, has come, and once again the intimacy has arisen. I also call this the Supreme Soul's grace. You will see that whoever the Supreme Soul has shown his Vishwarup, out of his own wish and his love, he has given them the perspective of love once again. After the Supreme Soul showed Mother Kaushalya the Vishwarup, the universal form, then once again he gave her back her own vision, and Mother Kaushalya thought that this is my Ram. After the Supreme Soul showed Mother Yashoda the Vishwarup, the universal form, then he once again gave her back the vision of love, and Mother Yashoda thought, this is my Lalan, Shri Krishna. In the same way, after the Supreme Soul showed Arjuna the Vishwarup, the universal form, then this is the grace of the Supreme Soul, that once again Arjuna got back his vision of love. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to live a normal life. This is what the Supreme Soul did. Samjaya says that the Supreme Soul comforted the terrified Arjuna, gave Arjuna patience, and gave Arjuna reassurance. It is a principle that the absolute form of Hari, God, can be seen. But if a person tries to do this, then there must be one person in a million who can fulfill their life's responsibilities while seeing the absolute form of Hari, God. But for an ordinary person, it becomes difficult to fulfill the responsibilities of the material world while having a vision of the absolute form of Hari, God. The Supreme Soul comforts Arjuna and gives him patience and reassurance. That is why the Lord came into his Saumya Swarup, the beautiful form. Just like when he had given the divine vision, it was Lord's grace. In the same way, once again the Lord came into his human form and his Saumya Swarup, the beautiful form, and this is also the Supreme Soul's grace. That is why it is said that the Supreme Soul comforted the terrified Arjuna. Arjuna describes what he now sees in the next verse.